93.9 FM, also streaming on the internet. And at this time, Radio Cayman's normal local music hour will not be heard this evening. It has been preempted for the town hall meeting taking place in CAYMAN BRAC. It comes to us live from, tape delayed from the Lyman E. Scott Senior High School in CAYMAN BRAC. The town hall concerns the Immigration Transition Amendment and Validation Bill 2025. Radio Cayman is also streaming the video on our Facebook and YouTube pages.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the CAYMAN BRAC Town Hall. This is hosted by the Ministry of Caymanian Employment and Immigration. And the purpose of tonight's Town Hall is to discuss the Immigration Transition Amendment and Validation Bill 2025. My name is Jevi Ebanks, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator for this evening's Town Hall. The purpose of the consultation is to provide transparency, encourage engagement, and ensure that the perspective of Caymanians, residents, industry representatives, and other interested parties are considered before the bill is finalized. You'll hear from our panelists later. The bill is expected to be debated, I think, in November, and if I got it wrong, I'm sure I'll be corrected. The purpose of tonight is to provide feedback on the objectives and the provisions outlined in the bill, including matters relating to Caymanian status, permanent residency and employment rights certificate, work permit requirements, financial standings, and compliance measures. Comments our panelists would hope would address the policy intent, practical implications, and other relevant considerations. It is also worth noting that the current bill does not propose any changes to the permanent residency framework. You'll hear more from our panelists. That is set to come later. Our panel is quite well represented of the Ministry of Caymanian Employment and Immigration, starting first with the Minister, the Honorable Michael Miles, and Member of Parliament for Prospect, the Chief Officer, Mr. Wesley Howell, as well as Ms. Rolna DeCosta, Senior Policy Advisor in the Ministry. For tonight, we are operating on a 2 questions per person standard. Whether you want to use that as 1 question and a follow-up or 2 individual questions, we invite you to have your questions at the back of the hall by the microphone, and our panelists would be happy to answer your questions. We ask you to be mindful that, of course, others may have questions that they want answered as well. Of course, if there's time at the end and there are more questions, we'd be happy to facilitate those questions. Before we get into the question section, we'll have a brief talk, and I use the word lightly when I say the word brief. I hold no words back. The minister don't know much about the word brief, but we putting him under pressure tonight. He told me he was going to be brief yesterday, and then he gave a TED talk. So it's going to be quite interesting. Had a PowerPoint presentation and everything he did. Quite interesting. Well, I also want to just put a note out there. If you are asking questions, we do ask you to be mindful. If you're asking personal questions or very direct questions that could have some identifying information, we want you to keep in mind that this town hall is being broadcast live on social media, so be extremely careful with putting out too much personal information. But that doesn't mean you cannot ask those questions tonight. There are ways that you can do that. You can speak to ministry staff, some who are at the back, some who are also seated at the front, and they'll be happy to speak to you one-on-one. You can, of course, jot the question down on a piece of paper, and the intended recipient will get it, and an answer will be provided. That's all from me. No, that's a lie. That's not all. One more thing. If you do have questions and comments that you do want to be included in the bill, please get it to the ministry before November the 14th. The email for you to send it to is immigrationconsultation@gov.ky. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Minister of Caymanian Employment and Immigration, the Honorable Michael Miles.
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Thank you, Jevi. Appreciate that. It is great to be here with you tonight to present this to you because we've been doing a lot of roundtable talks, and it's been great to have a lot of different consultations across industry, across different employers. Over the last, I would say, 6 weeks, we have probably we've had at least 7 different meetings with industry, who has been represented by, I don't know, probably about 80 plus employers, and it was interesting to get a lot of feedback from them as we shape this bill into something that we all can live with. What I'd like to do tonight is kind of provide an overview of where we're going with this, and provide you some information of why we also changed the name to the Ministry of Caymanian Employment. As I've expressed to a lot of folks, our goal is to ensure that all Caymanians who want employment have employment. Immigration is a critical part of this, but it's not 100% of it. So tonight, I want to just share with you some background. I've been in government now for the last 6 months. It's been a phenomenal opportunity to serve. All my life, I've embraced the opportunity. I've been in service at least for 35 years. My career is in social work and counseling, and in social development. And it's been a great honor to be part of this, because a lot of what we are doing is looking at how we can start to look ahead to help our young people. So tonight I want to just give you some background on where a lot of these reforms are coming from. My team have done a phenomenal job. They've actually been working on these reforms for the last 2 years. In the last 6 months, we have done a lot of great work to move it forward, because we think it's critically important to not just the success of our people, but the success of our country. We want to also look at our policy intent. Mr. Wesley is going to be providing you what the bill is. We're going to go through a lot of the highlights, the critical mass of the bill, and then, we're going to share what next steps and so forth looks like, and then, of course, take some questions from you, and hopefully we can clarify some more. As I said, it has always been an honor to sit, stand, to discuss, to get feedback. This is part of it, because immigration is not about Michael Miles or our national coalition. It's really about the Caymanian people. And the more that you're involved in this to help us guide and look at how we shape it, the better it is going to be for everyone, because we all have to own it. So I want to share with you just why we're here. And a major part of why we're here is we want to start to ensure that immigration works, and it works for everyone. In the last 6 months, I've embraced the concept of how do we fix it? Where do we start? Who do we ensure that is at the table when we're fixing this? And one of the major factors on why immigration continues to not evolve is, over the last probably 10 years, we have had a major issue: temporary work permits. When temporary work permits came in, it almost put immigration at a grinding halt, and we need to change that. Every year, immigration processes approximately 65,000 applications. These are work permits, Cayman status grants, PR grants, RERC, and there's a number of other facilities that people can actually qualify for. We are not going to, like the Immigration Department, cannot get more staff. While we need more staff, budget constraints have ensured that that's not possible right now. So we need to make sure that we can still serve you, the people, and the folks that need the talent that isn't in-house. We need to make sure that you get that talent. With 40,000 temps of the 65,000 work permits, it's clogging up the system. Temps were actually meant to be 1 to 3 months. A person comes in to fill maybe a maternity leave, 1 to 3 months, that person leaves. Lawyer comes in to represent someone on the island, 1 to 3 months, they spend in the court system, they leave. A doctor comes in to do whether it's some sort of facility of a procedure, and that person leaves. What has happened is that temps have become a precursor to a full work permit. It was never meant for that. We now have to start to look at that because that's all our department has been focused on. So we can't get to full or 1 year work permits because we are so busy processing temps. And also with temps comes people jumping from one work permit to another. Now, of the 40,000 work permit, or the 40,000 temps, 30,000 convert to a full work permit. So it tells us that people actually want a full work permit. But when we can't process work permits for 6 to 8 months, companies are going to subscribe to temps. So the goal is right now, and a lot of our changes, in particular work permit changes, are geared towards reducing those numbers. Another major thing that I uncovered, that my team informed me about, that they've been trying to get certain previous ministers to deal with, is we are touching one work permit 3 times. Person applies for a work permit, they really need a full work permit, but they need that person now, so they apply for a temp. Then they get that temp, and then they use the immigration department for their probationary period. So after the person exhausts their 3 months, that organization says, you know something, I'm going to extend this temp one more time. So the person, the company extends that temp because now that person's on a 90-day, 120 days probation, and they're using the immigration department for that. We were not designed for that. So we touch that work permit again. And then after 6 months, guess what happens? We then apply, that organization or that person applies for a 1 year work permit. Now, just imagine this. Do it 30,000 times. We have limited staff. If we want to start to look at efficiency, we have to get those numbers down. If you want a full work permit, we have to ensure that that work is done under 30 days. And that's where we're headed. These reforms will almost guarantee that. Another very scary statistic is the Cayman Islands government, the Cayman Islands people, which is you, we are spending approximately $40 million a year on tertiary education, and that's just the government. Of this semester, between September 2025 and June 2026, we're spending about $20 million on about 1,100 plus young people that are either overseas. We have at least 1,100 overseas, and we have at least 600 between UCCI, ICCI, and other organizations. Now, just imagine we have 40,000 temps. I don't know who those 1,000 students are, because one of the major challenges that we've had in government, that myself, and I'm happy to see that Minister DeCosta is here. I'd like to hail him up. Thank you for coming, sir. One of the major challenges that we've had is that government has been very siloed. And because government has been very siloed, I am responsible for helping people get in employment. But when I don't know who those 1,000 people are that are overseas or are on island, I can't help them. Mr. Howell can't help them. Mr. Jeremy, Sean Perdue, who's acting director, she can't help them because we don't know who they are. So myself and Minister Anglin have made it very clear that we have to be able to work together to ensure that those youngsters get employment, because Caymanian employment has to be first, not immigration. But they have to go hand in hand. So we have to get our temps under control. We have to know that the 20 million or 40 million overall is working for you, that the talent that we have coming back as Caymanians are assured employment because we are investing, you are investing. And so this statistic, we have to make sure that we decrease on unemployment among, in particular, our most talented people. There are two scary statistics that after I started to discuss with our caucus and started to also do multiple consultations on, it is very scary. Immigration makes over $130 million a year for the Cayman Islands government. And because successive governments has used it to very often at times build their legacies, build a lot of different things, most of it you don't need, but also balance our budget, we have gotten so used to all of the attempts because it's about money. But here's what happens. When our people can't get employment, what happens is that we've created welfare. So the Department of Financial Assistance, of that $100+ million that immigration makes, $60 million goes towards welfare. Because now a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old that is able-bodied who cannot get a job in the Cayman Islands can go to the Department of Financial Assistance, and I can tell you, all I have done is talk to young people from all over the world. They want to come back to work in their own country. They cannot. I've talked to hundreds of young people here. I've talked to parents, grandparents, who are concerned that their young people are coming back to our country and they cannot get employment. So they're going to the Department of Financial Assistance and they qualify. So we have a growing number of able-bodied young people that are filing for welfare. We can no longer allow that. We have to make sure that there's a transition between a student finishing school and moving into the workforce. Hence, we have to make sure that employment is there for them. Another very scary statistic is the Ministry of Health provides approximately $75 million in indigent health care. Now, when we have people that cannot earn enough to pay their own bills, in particular their health care, they're going to get probably the cheapest health care. And unfortunately, when a lot of these people, our people, get into problems with health care, the Cayman Islands government bails them out. We're not going to let them hang. So therefore, we are picking up on that as well. So that $130 million that immigration earns, we've just spent it. We don't want to do that anymore. We want to put it back into community. We want to build our people more. We want to build our government. We want to build our communities. Our goal right now is to make sure that at 40,000 we reduce. We have more jobs in the Cayman Islands than we have people. We're always going to need guest workers. I'm not anti-foreigner. My responsibility is prioritizing the 40,000 Caymanians that we call Caymanians, that we know that we have to represent. We have to make sure that we build our infrastructure, and we cannot continue to spend it on things that ultimately isn't going to make our people progress. So these are some scary stats. Now, another scary stat that we've had to resolve is making sure that our boards improve how we process things. We have 4 immigration boards, and we have to ensure that our boards are up to speed with moving work permits faster. We are in the top probably 10 financial centers in the world. We have to have talent from all over the world to make sure that this runs properly. And if that's not in-house talent, we have to make sure that lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers move in, their work permits are granted so they can take up their jobs, teach our kids, take care of our elderly, and all of this stuff have to be done. Our organization that we call work, it is absolutely too inefficient, and we have to expedite that. And a major part of that, I want you to just see this one here, our boards. So we have 4 boards, and 65,000 applications come in. The boards are processing less than 15%, which is about a little under 10,000 applications a year. We need to move that forward a bit more. So we have to become more efficient because competition is real. all from regionally to internationally. We can't afford to lose business because we are not doing a good job. So immigration on a whole, we have to be able to expedite, right? So there's a number of reforms that's coming in to help us with that. So our work administrators processes probably 85% to higher in terms of work permits. So we also did a complete reform of our boards. The folks that were on the boards before were phenomenal people. We replaced them with people that are also phenomenal people with the hope that we have to get this better. Now, our goal has always been, how do we get better? How do we lay politics to the side, and how do we get better? As I said, my responsibility as minister, Minister DeCosta's responsibility as minister, is to protect you as the Caymanian people and ensure that your children, your grandchildren has a future in our country. Whatever happened before us, at the end of the day, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. We're here now, and my responsibility is to make sure that I respond in an efficient way. Therefore, our Department of Immigration, our Department of Labor, our Department of Pension have to be more robust, and that's where we're headed. The current landscape of where we're at is, if you can see, between 2015 and 2025, we processed over almost 10,000 permanent residency applications. Here's what I'm hearing. I feel outnumbered in my own country. I don't feel like I belong here anymore. These are all coming from folks like yourselves, but the majority of it is coming from young people. Young people who are saying, I don't fit in here anymore. Where's my home? How do I afford land? How do I live? How do I raise a family? If we continue on this trend, we are never going to ensure that all of the investment that you've made as parents and grandparents, that the government have made, that private sector have made, is actually coming back as talent. Because now we are putting so many people in our country that they are now competing. Now, as I said, I'm not anti-foreigner. My responsibility is to preserve our culture, preserve our heritage, and protect our people. Of the 9,000, 2,971 came through the PR grant system. Our responsibility, we have to review that. We can no longer have folks come into our country, walk a couple of dogs for a year, after spending 8 or 9 years here, and simply just hand them citizenship. No other country in the world is doing this. Why are we? We can no longer just give citizenship away. We have to protect it. It's ours to protect. It's our heritage. It's our culture. We have to now safeguard our properties. We have to make sure that there's generations to come that our people are able to afford this. Of the 9,000, 4,025 individuals qualified through marriage as Caymanians. Another major challenge that we're battling with in immigration is marriages of convenience. Now, I can tell you we have at least 16 compliance officers. I can hire another 16. I can hire another 100. We're never going to get through all of the investigations that we are having to deal with. We have approximately 200 marriages of convenience that have been reported to work. Now, people may say, well, why can't we get through that? Because it's harder to prove. We've had to put things in the legislation that the director and the board has some discretion, that when they find this stuff out, we don't need to take it to court. We can say, I'm sorry, we suspect that this is happening, and you no longer qualify for this. Right now, nothing protects our people. So a lot of what we are dealing with is reforming our point system. Some people will say, well, let's do away with it. We want to, but we believe that we can reform it. And we have had a lot of consultation on this as well. And that's another thing that's going to be coming out to you, so you can see that as well. This is what the status grants look like between 2005 and 2025. Every day I wake up, this is the start that I consistently am scared of. We have to start to protect our citizenship, our way of life. from the BRAC to Little Cayman to Grand Cayman. Our responsibility as leaders of the country is to ensure that our forefathers, that their lineage, their heritage is handed down for generations to come. In some way down the line, we have forgotten that as leaders. We're always, as I said, we're going to need talent from the outside. But every young person in our country, every older folk that still have at least some gas left in the tank must get employment in our country. Without reform, I know all of you guys live in still in a small island where you're not bumper to bumper, but you guys know what happens on Grand. It's gridlock traffic. We don't have a plan. We are now getting a plan, a development plan, but we've not had one. We just wanted to grow. We have 90,000 people as a population. At 16 years old, there was less than 20,000 people in 1990 when I graduated high school. I didn't have to compete with anyone internationally. I competed with the 200 or 300 plus kids that I graduated with. Today, our children are now having to not just compete with the other 45 or 50,000 foreigners in our country, but the 9 billion. We have to be able to give them a hand up. So therefore, we have to protect our infrastructure. It's costing us. And when someone could stay in another country and buy up all of our property, it is simply just wrong. And we have to now make sure that safeguards are in place. Jobs, housing, land ownership, these are the things that young people have told us we have to change. All of the political parties, all of independents campaigned on this stuff. What Nicholas and I, along with our party, and certainly along with our coalition, have said, we're going to live this. We simply cannot talk about this stuff anymore. We have to protect our people. We have to make sure that our children are able to buy property, to build a house, to have kids, that our youngsters can go to school and not feel that they're in a classroom of 500. We have to ensure that Cayman is for Caymanians again. Hence, without immigration reform, we can't do that. So you will hear Mr. Wesley talk about a number of the reforms and why we're doing it. Well, a major part of this is here. Loss of cultural balance. Over the last 6 months, I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of young people who have talked about their identity. They're struggling with that because they don't hear their language anymore. You know, you're either talking some other language, you go into a store or a restaurant or a bar or a hotel, you know, or a retail shop, and they don't see them, they don't see themselves. We have to correct that. Our ministry's vision is to a resilient Cayman Islands where empowered Caymanians and balanced workforce strategies support a prosperous community in delivering sustainable growth. When we set this as a vision, I wanted our people to understand we need growth. It has to be sustainable. However, we have to have a balanced workforce strategies. So we are putting down more of workforce strategies. Over the last 6 months, we've made many, many attempts to ensure that people are moving back in particular in the tourism sector. In September, we had a massive jobs drive. 300 Caymanians showed up. At least 4 from the BRAC showed up. All of those young people, young women are employed. Over 130 young people receive job commitments from at least 2 hotels. And that's just 2. Our responsibility is to move that trend forward. Every single quarter, we will be having a jobs drive. Today, just this week, we have 2 jobs drive. One GT, one of the newer hotels, had a jobs drive. We had at least 15. We invited 15 young people showed up for a 6-week program. All of them are guaranteed jobs once they stick that 6-week program out. Today, I was at the Kimpton. We invited 100. 11 young people showed up, or a mixture of young and old folks showed up. Because we want to make sure, I don't care if one person show up, we're moving it forward. We're going to flood this country with Caymanians who want to work. And it's the same thing. I've told Nick, we're coming to the BRAC because the goal is we're putting our people back to work, and we're going to provide training. We're going to do whatever it takes in order to reverse where the strategies must work. Our mission is to deliver people-centered. As I've said to work, I've said to DLP, our responsibility is to inform our people. We have to inform you of what our laws are. We have to make sure that you're consistently part of that. You are our customer. You are the most important customer in the Cayman Islands. I work for you. I don't work for the government. I work for you, the people. My responsibility is to honor that on a regular basis. So our responsibility is to make sure that as we focus on promoting economic well-being, that also includes our people. We are not just building a Cayman for the folks that get off a plane or a boat. We're building Cayman because we have citizens, and we have to move that forward as well. We foster strong partnerships and facilitate information sharing while ensuring compliance. Over the last 6 months, one of the deepest trenches that we've had to dig out of is sharing information. So our caucus, our coalition, we're consistently sharing information. Nick and I consistently share information. He has an enforcement arm. I have an enforcement arm. They must work together. They must share information. They must share data. Minister Anglin and I share clients. We share the same clients. He must share information with me so I can make sure that as those scholarships come to an end, those youngsters move right into employment. Every organization under our government has been informed they are going to be forced to share information. Yes, I respect data protection. Yes, I'm not asking them to share pertinent information that would, violate anything. But the information that they must share must be able to help us protect our people. Compliance is another area. We have to start to enforce our laws. And that's one of the areas that we have been focused on over the last 6 months. The policy intent, Mr. Wesley is going to go over. That is my time. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you listening to the rest of it. All of it is very relevant, and I appreciate, I'm hoping that everyone have a lot of questions at the end of this. Thank you.
And now, Chief Officer in the Ministry of Caymanian Employment and Immigration, Mr. Wesley Howell.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. So my job is to take you through what is usually the dry part of the presentation, because I'm going to get into the legislation, so it's a bit cut and dry. We'll have some time for question and answer at the end, so you can make your notes as we go through. But I'll take you through the journey of the highlights of the amendments. I encourage you to read the bill. Before I start, I'll share a bit. So if you're not familiar with how government bills work in relation to this one, where it's not a complete rewrite of existing legislation, what the bill actually does is it details clause by clause what the bill is modifying in the original law. So if something is not stated in the bill, that means that it's not changing that piece in the law. The bill is laid out, I think page 2, 3, 4, 5 have the reason and objects of the bill. Each clause, there's a little explanation as to what that is changing, and then you can read the details in there. To actually make sense of the bill, you have to have the existing law as well as the bill open as you go through. But hopefully what we share tonight will help to give you a good overview of what's in there and how this process is going forward. So the policy intent of these changes is to update and refine the existing immigration legislation to ensure that it is responsive and that it matches the social and economic circumstances that we now see ourselves in. The last major update that we had to the immigration law was 2015, so 10 years ago. So it's been a long time since we've gone substantial changes in there. The first change up, and for the folks in the room who are a little gray, like I'm getting gray, we'll see that this is a familiar name. To recognize the government's intent to put Caymanians first and keep Caymanians first. The act is being renamed from the Immigration Transition Act to the Caymanian Protection Act. So that's for the folks that were around, and when we won Mr. Ocy's show last Friday, he reminded me that in 2003, the name of the immigration legislation at that point was the Caymanian Protection Law. So this one is Act, not law, but we're changing the name. Changes in relation to work permits. In an effort to curb job hopping and to encourage some stability within the labor market, the work permit holders within their first 2 years of employment cannot leave an employer and jump to another employer without taking a break for 1 year. Exemptions are available for prescribed circumstances, and those would include individuals who are being abused at work and those sorts of things. So we don't want to tie someone to someone who is not paying them properly and so on. But in order to have those prescribed circumstances apply, we would have to investigate and ensure that those arguments that they're putting forward for why they need to change are no longer are legitimate. So no longer will individuals be allowed to come to the island on a temporary work permit and within their first month or so shop around for employment that would then take them to 6 months, and then shop around for employment that will take them to 2 years. We also have heard significant feedback from small and medium-sized businesses, some of whom, in order to satisfy the diversity of employment, are flying people from halfway around the world to come and work here, that those individuals, once they're established and get to know the landscape, will then shop around for an employer that will pay them a bit more. They'll cancel their work permit and go job hopping to get on to some another employee who would pay a bit more than they're paying. So this provision is targeted at preventing those sorts of exploitations. Mr. Javi, our moderator, one of his tasks with Radio Cayman is to cover the courts. Last evening he shared with the group that we were at that there's a individual, non-Caymanian individual, who was, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced yesterday to 3 months in prison on a number of charges, including documents and so on that are related to fraudulent work permits. So this person was effectively tricking people from his country on fraudulent work permits to bring them here. In some cases, when they get here, then they need to look for work. So all that we're hoping to address with this bit. The other exploitation that is being addressed through legislation is margins of convenience among work permit holders. So we all talk about margin of convenience as it relates to people with PR and persons with Caymanians who marry non-Caymanians, but we have created a system where the current legislation offers a benefit to individuals who get married here. So the way that works, and it's being exploited, I'm here working and I'm on a work permit. I get up to like my year 7, year 8. I'm going to hit my term limit at year 9. I find someone who is willing to enter into an arrangement with me. We get married, and that person is at year 1 of their work permit. So when I hit my year 9, I then attach to their work permit and continue on as their work permit dependent. So I can then run for another 9 years on theirs. So we end up working 17, 18 years and exploiting that aspect. So this provision says that if you want to attach yourselves, it's the lower of the two, not the higher of the two. So one spouse can carry on, but the other spouse who is nearing the term limit will not be able to attach onto that lower term, the longer term limit. Changes in relation to RARC and PRs. RARC is persons married to Caymanians, PR persons who are granted permanent residence through the point system. The changes here extend the time frame for effectively the time frame for naturalization. So walking through the current timeline, you you come on year one on a work permit. As Minister just shared, most people would come on a 3-month work permit. Then before that's up, they apply for a 6-month temporary, and before that's up, they apply for a grant. So if they continue on until year 8, and they're still able to hold a work permit at year 8, they can apply for permanent residency. If they meet the points required to qualify for permanent residency, at year 9, they're granted permanent residency with a certificate that has no end date. So the permanent residency is open-ended. As soon as you get an open-ended immigration document from the Cayman Islands, and you satisfied the 3 years in country, 1 year free of immigration controls, you can then apply for naturalization. So by year 10, that person has a Cayman Islands passport, and if they continue on permanent residency, they can then, if they meet the criteria, apply for the right to be Cayman at year 15. This provision makes it so that your first, if they go through to year 8, apply for PR, the PR facility that they're granted at year 10 is only good for 5 years, so it has an end date at year 15. That means that during that period, up until year 15, that individual is not free of immigration controls and then cannot actually apply for naturalization, so no Cayman Islands passport. At year 14, in the proposed system, they would then apply for a second PR facility, and if granted at year 15, that PR facility would be open-ended, meaning that they could then get naturalized at year 16. Yeah. In relation to continuation of RERC for parents of Caymanian children, significant mischief has been experienced around this, and effectively individuals who are married to a Caymanian who have a child of that union, or indeed some persons have managed to attach children, Caymanian children from outside that union to their RERC, are able to argue that they have a right to family life under the Constitution for children who are Caymanian, even if they have no involvement, no financial support with that Caymanian child. So the law is being amended to allow for the department and the boards to be able to request social inquiry reports, and these would come from our sister departments, DCFS, the Department of Community Rehabilitation, and the courts in case of like the family court and so on, to ensure that the individual who is claiming a right to family life is indeed a positive influence in their Caymanian child's life. And if they aren't, then we would move to proceed with revocation of that facility. This is often used as a get-out-of-jail-free card, where an individual who is committed crimes in Cayman on permanent residence, on RERC, married to Caymanian, no longer in a stable marriage, or they may have been divorced, when they're finished their prison sentence and the courts have recommended deportation, when our sister agency, CBC, reach out to them and give them a mindful to the board notice, they'll say, I have a Caymanian child, and then we're off to that. So this will also help to satisfy and prevent those sorts of situations where individuals who don't effectively only donated DNA would not be able to use that to continue to live within the Cayman Islands under the precepts of the RERC. We're also including some additional checks and balances. So we're including revocation facilities, provisions around a person's character, and also in relation to their ability to meet certain medical criteria, i.e. in good health and so on. And we're also seeking to clarify within the law that you can only apply for continuation of your RERC as the spouse of a Caymanian if the child for whom you're seeking to attach your stay to is a child from the union of that Caymanian spouse. So if you have a child outside of the marriage, you would not be able to maintain the facility from the marriage with that child that's outside the marriage. Expanded grounds for revocation, piggybacking on what I just shared, this one now is in relation to revocation. So PR may be revoked if the holder fails to support their Caymanian child, or if the marriage or civil partnership is deemed to be a marriage of convenience. So this one is what Minister talked briefly about. We're amending the law to make it less of a burden to prove that a marriage is one of convenience. There will be sufficient evidence that would bring the decision makers to the point that they can make a ruling on this. Before anyone gets excited that we're going to breach people's right to appeals and so on, this is actually appealable, but the provisions are such that a decision can be taken based on the evidence that is there. It's almost impossible to actually convict someone for a marriage of convenience unless one of those two individuals self-incriminates and say, yes, I knowingly went into an agreement with someone, and I'm giving you all the evidence that you need to do so. Otherwise, what we rely on, and this was a question from last night, what do you look for when you have a marriage, when you suspect a marriage of convenience? So I declined to provide the details because I didn't want to give anyone any ideas of what we're looking for so they know what to hide. But what we can say is that the investigators have certain things that they look for, and that evidence then would meet the threshold for which they have reasonable grounds to be able to refuse that bit. RERC held through marriage or civil partnership may be revoked if the union ends before 7 years, and so that's an automatic revocation from year 1 to year 7. If the marriage ends between year 7 and year 15, it's at the discretion of the board or the director in relation to them, to that facility continuing on. That provision was added because the courts have pushed back on some of the mandatory revocations that have been done in the past, where, for example, the non-Caymanian spouse with RERC is being severely abused and so on in the relationship. It's a long-standing marriage up to a significant number of years, and the courts felt that it wasn't fair nor proportionate for it to be an automatic revocation, that the board should be able to exercise some discretion. So that's been added for year 8 through 15. Persons who have had their RERC revoked can reapply with consideration for reinstating that RERC within 3 months of the revocation. That's an additional time frame that's being added to the law. Discretionary consideration of RERC. Spoke a bit about this, but this now is in relation to persons I'm just reading my notes here. Yeah, so this is providing a similar precept for the decision the discretion to be had in relation to Cayman status or permanent residency if the marriage or civil partnership has been dissolved or otherwise terminated. So a similar provision as to the slide before this one. Changes to Caymanian status. So I talked earlier about the extension of the years under PR before you can actually get naturalized, and that's been increased as well, so by 5 years, and there's a similar 5 years being added to the period under which an individual has to be in the Cayman Islands, legal and ordinary resident, and be able to meet the criteria for which they can qualify for right to be Caymanian status. So under this precept now, you have to have been in country and naturalized for 20 years before you can apply for the right to be a Caymanian. Currently, it's 15 years. So if you have PR and you hit year 15 in country, you can apply for Caymanian status. When the law changes, and if you're marriage happens after the law change, then your timeline before you can qualify for that, or your timeline if you acquire PR after the law comes into effect, is 20 years. Currently, I skipped over point two. Point two is a bit of a nuance. The naturalization process, although they're being naturalized, because of their connection to the Cayman Islands, the legislation that is being used to do that is the British Nationality Act of 1981. If someone lives in Bermuda and they're being naturalized, they use the exact same legislation. It's the UK's legislation, not ours. So if we had someone from Bermuda working here who had PR and wanted to become, wanted to apply for the right to be Caymanian, and the law now says that you can only do that if you're naturalized in Cayman, they can't be naturalized again. So we recognize the fact that we have some BOTC citizens connected to another OT who've been here for 20 years. They have PR. They'll now be able to apply at year 20 as well, as opposed to 15 years now. Point three is a nuance. So individuals who are married or in a civil partnership with Caymanians have two routes to go the route of applying for their own right to be Caymanian. So one route is to apply for RARC and go through that process and get naturalized and so on. The other route is actually, currently in law, they can apply for the right to be Caymanian after 7 years. That 7 years is being increased to 15 years. Caymanians who have applied for Cayman as a right. So this provision is probably the most vexing for generational Caymanians when they apply for some facility that they need to show that they are Caymanian. So when we introduced the penalties for the employer to have to pay a fine if they employ someone who is not Caymanian, they quickly figured out that we have persons walking around with BOTC Cayman Islands passports that are not Caymanian. Some of those persons may have lost their permanent residency and don't have a right to work, or have a right to work that's in a specific field. So the employers started asking for proof that people were Caymanian. If you want to make Caymanians vexed, ask them to go apply to Ms. Sean or Mr. Jeremy Scott for a piece of paper that says they're Caymanians when they can trace their lineage back 5-6 generations. So we've had well over 17,000 persons apply for acknowledgement that they are Caymanian. So we're not granting them anything. This is them applying for a document that proves that they are Caymanian. Students joining school have to provide that. Students applying for a government scholarship need to provide that. Spouses who are not Caymanian applying for a benefit, they would have to apply for that by their connection to a Caymanian. So at the time that those applications are being made, the documents that are being supplied are literally not only verifying that the child or the spouse is connected to a Caymanian, but it's also showing that the individual is Caymanian themselves. So this change will allow someone like myself, so my boys are acknowledged as Caymanians, and I can now write to, once the law comes in, I'll be able to write to the director of work and said, please send me my confirmation that I am Cayman, my acknowledgement document, and I would not need to supply any additional documents because they already have all of my documents that I supplied through my son, but I don't have to make a formal written application with affidavit and birth certificates and all that kind of stuff because they already have all that. So it's a small, but I think would be a meaningful change for all those people who are too proud to write to the director to get something that says they have what they know they already have because they have it for many generations. This is in relation to the loss and revocation of Caymanian status. So currently, within the existing immigration transition law, individuals who have been granted the right to be Caymanian by a board or by the director can lose that right if they are not legal and ordinary resident in the islands for more than 5 years. So that's for the parents. So for example, if 2 work permit holders have a child in the Cayman Islands, that child at birth would take the nationalities of the parents. For sure the mother, depending on what nationality the father is, it may be some of the things that they have to do. But if those parents then go on to become Cayman before the child turns 18, that child would be granted Caymanian status as a child of a Caymanian. They will lose it at 18 because they become an adult at 18 and are no longer dependent and would have to apply for a continuation of that right. And there's some criteria that they need to meet for that. So currently in the law, the time frame for those children of persons who became Caymanian and the child ultimately became Caymanian, their loss provision, the time that they have to be abroad before they can lose it, is in the current law is 7, and that change is going to be made so that they go back to 5 years. So they match the parents, and the children will be on the same 5-year loss provision as it is in the law now. Minister spoke about the number of persons who qualify for the right to be Caymanian through marriage, and by far that's the largest category of persons. And the Department of Work, I'm still waiting on them to give me the final details because we've asked for their sort of a summary of the number of cases that they investigated and number of those that have resulted in revocations of facilities because of sham marriages or marriages of convenience. We have our compliance folks chasing down court records, chasing down social media, relying on information being sent in to us in relation to suspected marriages of convenience. So the law is being amended to change the onus on the applicants. So for the first 7 years after the Caymanian status is granted by way of marriage, the persons in that marriage would have to send in an annual declaration that their marriage is still intact. So we're not asking for any financial information. It's not like the PR application that is there. There's no fee attached to it, but you will send in a formal document that you sign and get notarized and so on that says that, yes, my marriage is still intact. Failure to turn in that document constitutes an offense and is grounds for revocation. And as part of the committee stage consultation like we're doing now, we receive feedback to say we should actually add in some of the more serious penalties that we've done in other parts of the legislation, which includes provisions for a fine of $10,000 and or a imprisonment for up to a year. So the grounds for lying on the documents, I think, will get quite severe and will help to prevent the sham marriages from progressing on. We talked a little bit about this in terms of the sham marriages and the false information. This relates more directly to persons who are on work permit or PR holders. So currently, work has a policy that specifies the amount for which a person has to, or a couple have to earn per month to be able to afford their first dependent. The Cayman Islands is not the cheapest of jurisdictions to live in. That amount in law is $3,500 now and $500 for each additional dependent. Through the consultation on the drafting of the bill, that amount has been increased to $5,000 per month joint income for the first dependent, inclusive of gratuities for those that have that as part of their take-home pay. And for each additional dependent, it's $1,000. We've instituted the significant fine and penalty that we've talked about in terms of imprisonment in this one because evidence has shown that Caymanian employers are overly generous when it comes to writing in applications for their workers, in that they will help them to, at least on paper, meet the existing $3,500 a month. So what I mean by that is a work permit application comes in and the person reports that they're getting paid $2,000 a month. When the application comes in for an amendment to add a dependent, the salary per month jumps from $2,000 to exactly $3,500 that is required for the first dependent. So we realize that that particular provision is actually being misused, and hence the inclusion of the financial provisions, the false information on the financial submission that has the $10,000 fine and or 1 year imprisonment, which we think would act as a serious deterrent for persons putting documents forward with untruth on them. Annual declarations now are currently only being filed for persons on the 8-year PR points system. We are proposing to change the legislation so that other types of declarations, so we already spoke about the marriage, but those persons who get PR by way of substantial business presence, so that's a major investment in a Caymanian business, or direct investment in property or so on, they also have to now file an annual declaration to say that all of the criteria under which they were granted is still a valid criteria, and if they don't meet that, then they have a certain period of time for which they can acquire the necessary investments to maintain that. Otherwise, they would lose their facility. Not reporting on the annual anniversary of your grant then would constitute an offense and would be grounds for revocation of those facilities as well. Minister spoke briefly about this. So we have some issues around data sharing where some of the key information that we need to make decisions as it would relate to enforcement action, as it would relate to making decisions for revocation or for grant, are not being shared by the key government agencies. And more importantly, as it comes to our students, our Caymanian students who are away at school or doing school within the islands, we would really love to be able to provide the administrators and the boards with information to say, here are the students coming back from university, here's what they're studying, so you know when you're granting work permits or considering work permits in particular areas that you have students coming back with those skill sets, so that we can then ensure that they have an opportunity to make it in and we don't actually grant multi-year work permits that would lock a student out. Conversely, if we have a identified demand for certain skill sets and we don't have any students or persons who have those skill sets that are Caymanian, we may consider comfortably making a decision that we can grant that. Instead of granting a 1-year work permit, we can grant a 2 or 3 year work permit to allow them to work without overburdening our systems, knowing with confidence that we're not blocking a Caymanian from applying for an opportunity by doing so. We're also working then to share that scholarship database, and we were informed by folks to ensure that we don't forget to include Caymanian students who are not on scholarship but are undergoing education by parents or by themselves by working and going through school, to ensure that they're included in this. So that's also going to be part of that information sharing. Employers we've been meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, and they're working collectively with the government in relation to a national workforce task force in order to put together a national workforce plan. One of the things that the employers have been asking for is an ability to search the student database for skill sets that might match people that they're looking for. So if I'm looking for an electric car auto technician, is there somebody overseas or locally that's doing that? I can then reach out to that person and say, hey, would you like to come work for me? The information sharing agreement that we have would not allow us to do that, because that's sharing their information with a third party. But what we can do is ask them for their permission to do that. for a scholarship, we think that's going to be really easy. It's one of the things that you sign when you get your scholarship. Check the box, free to share my information with prospective employers. We can then publish your information that those employers can search for it. And again, increasing the opportunities and the exposure for jobs in Cayman for Caymanian students to be able to tap into. Exemptions on the 53(1)B. Section 53 in general are where exemptions to work permits and term limits are held. 53(1)B is a specific type of exemption that is at the purview of the cabinet. Some of those exemptions, when we do them, for example, for groups of people who may work for a particular employer, we would publish that in the Gazette that details the specifics of that grant. In some cases, 53(1)Bs are being granted where there's a dire medical need and so on, and Cabinet has not been publishing those as gazetted in relation to that, because it would bring scrutiny on that particular Caymanian family and their personal circumstances and the hardship that they're going through. So those have not been published as a matter of practice. So this amendment allows the law to match the practice that we've done that protects that privacy of those individuals. And before you get concerned that Cabinet will do these grants in secret, you should know that the grants of exemptions on the 53(1)B are, the fact that it's been granted is published as part of the Cabinet minutes. So there's a record that the grant has happened. We just wouldn't name the family and the reasons why an individual has been given an exemption to support that family, as an example. Public sector term limits is coming in. There was already an amendment to the Public Service Management Act in relation to instituting term limits for civil servants who are non-Caymanian. There needs to be a associated amendment to the Immigration Transition Act, Caymanian Protection Act coming up, that allows that to happen. So what this will do is exempt civil servants from work permits, but would not exempt them from term limits. So civil servants don't apply for work permits. They're granted a contract after having gone through the job advertising and so on process of the civil service. When those contracts are issued, that then constitutes their right to work and stay in the Cayman Islands for the length of the contract. This then would allow term limits to come in, but would not require them to apply for a work permit as it currently is. Section 53 is also being amended in a bit of a technical way to indicate that term limits also don't apply and work permits don't apply to judges, magistrates, who are individuals who are appointed by Her Excellency the Governor, but are not civil servants. So they don't fall under the Personnel Management Act, and the DG has no oversight of them. They're appointed by the Governor's signature. So they're named out as their positions are not ones that require work permits, and the term limits don't apply to them, as are persons employed by the Parliament who may be non-Caymanian. Again, they're not considered, those individuals are not considered civil servants. They don't fall underneath the DG in terms of appointment, so they're exempted from that aspect as well. So specialist caregiver and commercial farmhand certificates are the next sections that we'll deal with. Specialist caregiver certificates are currently in place. It's a certificate that a family can apply for under special circumstances, and this provision allows the caregiver to be granted a 5-year certificate. So this is a means of them bypassing the term limit. So if you've had a caregiver in your house, a domestic helper in your house, whose services are key to an elderly parent who may have dementia or Alzheimer's, or a child with a disability who requires certain specific skill sets and has a connection with a caregiver. Those are some of the criteria in which you can now apply for that specialist caregiver. And currently, the 5-year certificate is renewable repeatedly, so an individual could potentially have 4 or 5 specialist caregiver certificates taking them out 20, 30 years in country. What is being proposed is that those certificates will continue to be valid for 5 years, but can only be issued for a maximum of 2 times. So that means that a specialist caregiver can work for a family for a maximum of 19 years based on the current term limit, or until the caregiver reaches the age of 65, whichever of the two comes first. We've also received requesting support from the Ministry and Department of Agriculture as it relates to farmhands. They've recognized that skilled farm labor is in worldwide shortage, and they've asked for a similar certificate to be issued for commercial farmers. So I quickly add that these are not backyard farmers, small farming operations. It's commercial agricultural producers is how it's defined in the legislation, and those persons who qualify then would be able to have that certificate matched to that specific organization, that specific farm, and issued for 5 years, could be renewed for a further 5 years, cannot be renewed more than twice, and also has the age 65 limit as well. Fees and fines, talked a bit about this. We have a common operating procedure now where individuals, I'll cover point 2 first and go back to 1, where individuals may have, say, multiple businesses. So they may have a domestic helper slash cashier. So they work part-time in the house and then they work part-time in the business. When those things happen, the folks over at Department of Work, they'll go in and create a new code for that, a new occupation for that individual. So we have an extensive list of occupations broken down by industries, and as long as that list is, work actually has a list of created codes outside of those that are longer than what's in the regulations. So this amendment will put us back into sticking within those groups. So you'll pick the occupation that closest matches the occupation for which you're seeking to be had, and any changes to those occupations would be now by way of amendments to the schedule and not merely by creating a separate list. For those of you who do your own customs clearances, you use the tariff codes, which are harmonized. So if you're clearing a can of beans, it has a specific code attached to it. It's the same code that's being used by the US if it's coming from there, or from Panama if you're bringing it from there. They use the exact same codes. There is a similar code for jobs that is worldwide standard. Some countries have their own tweaks to ensure that it covers all the markets that they have. So we are not in relation to this bit, but we are moving in the direction of having standardized codes for jobs as well. But this is one step towards that. There are also some changes in relations to refunds of certain fees, and that will come in relation to prorating and so on as part of those changes. What happens next? So we are under the constitutional required 28 days of public consultation. For those of you who've been following Minister Miles, you know that he's been talking about immigration for the last 5 months. A lot of the things that we have in this bill are things that he's been talking about, and a lot of the ideas in this bill were actually part of the white paper that was published prior to the election earlier this year as well. So these concepts have actually been out for quite some time. The consultation is a formal process, so we have information on our website, gov.ky/labor. That's the ministry's website. And there's also information on the website, publicconsultation.gov.ky. Is that right, Martha? Yeah, perfect. Keeping me straight in the back there. We're going through the formal consultation process through to November 14th. And it sounds really long, but November starts on Saturday. Yeah, so we have approximately 2 more weeks to go. We've been getting quite a bit of feedback in relation to questions, and we've published a frequently asked question document. And based on some of the questions that we've gotten through our town hall meetings and so on, we're going to keep adding to that, so that will answer most of the questions there. And Minister Miles is quite eager to have this passed and into law. So the expectation is that this will be debated in the November sitting of Parliament as soon as we pass the 14-day consultation window. There are a few things that will be amended via committee stage amendments. Some of that is some legalese and so on, but we're looking forward to safe passage of the bill and for commencement. The bill will come into force with commencement orders, and the bill has extensive transitional provisions. So the first and the most prevalent questions we have is in relation to individuals. How does this affect me? How does this affect my spouse? How does it affect my children? So the simplest way for me to explain that is, if you are married or enter into a marriage before the law becomes effective, your marriage be considered under the law for which it was enforced when you got married. So if you get married after the law comes in, you'd be on the train that is 15 years without naturalization or 20 years with naturalization. If you got married before that and you're applying, it's 7 years for right to be Cayman through marriage, or 15 years for PR, for Cayman status through PR, through RERC. If you are already on your way to right to be Caymanian, you continue on that road. So all of that happens under the existing provision. Literally, if you have a look at the Immigration Transition Act now, it has provisions that said if you were born before 1977, this applies. If you were born before 2003, this applies. So every time we change the law, we have been grandfathering people. And the reason that we do that is really simple. We can legislate that it is retroactive, but the courts will shoot that down every day of the week. So when we ask for legal advice, the Attorney General in his chambers will say, based on case law and so on, you need to grandfather in people so that this doesn't retroactively apply to them. So the difference in that would be in relation to persons on work permit. So when your work permit ends and you apply for a new work permit, the new provisions apply to you at that point. So, and you can't file an application early and have it be considered. So for example, if you're in year 7 and you're thinking about applying for PR, you can't do that until you get to year 8. So that application would be null and void and would not be able to be locked into the old legislation. Similarly, if you're in a marriage and you're at year 5 now and you want to apply for the right to be Caymanian through marriage at year 7, you wouldn't be able to file that early, but if you already have your RERC, you will continue on your year 7 bit, yeah? So those provisions are laid out in the transitional provisions and will kick in only for new facilities that are done after the law comes into effect. The law is designed and written in such a way that it will come into effect by way of commencement. What that means is that it gives the minister and the cabinet the flexibility to bring in sections of the law at different times. So we are expecting that the very first set of changes that would come in would be amendments that would be related to introducing term limits for civil servants, because the DG has already gotten parliamentary approval for that to start on the 1st of January 2026. So this provision, the sister provision, would have to be made and into force by that period as well. Next steps, we are continuing with our work. Our team is small in the ministry, but we're extremely active as it relates to the things that we're doing. So we are responsible for 3 major pieces of legislation in our ministry, the Immigration Transition Act, and we have the first tranche of changes done by Ms. Rolna DaCosta here. She's been the lady working very closely with legal drafters, bringing it to where it is. We have another piece of legislation changes as it relates to PR point system and so on. There's another member of staff, Ms. Letitia Goring, who's working on that, coming very closely behind. So as soon as we get through this one, very closely will that one be coming. We're also working very actively on changes to the Labor Act that would match some of this, to modernize that act as well, and also changes to the Pension Act. There's been a new pension board appointed. They're going through their onboarding now. Minister Miles put his money where his mouth is, and although the pension board members work for free, he went out and found the best and the brightest people with pension experience, actuarial experience, HR experience, and so on. And that board is acting as, by law, an advisory board to the ministry and the minister, recommending not only changes to legislation, but also things like changes to contribution rates and those sorts of things. So lots of work happening all across the ministry. We're also working very closely now with our, even more so than usual, our partners at CBC, DCI, that's the Trade and Business Licensing folks, Department of Labor and Pensions, it falls under our ministry, Health Insurance Commission, and RCIPS. So number of bits happening there, and cross-ministry, cross-department operations will continue on. We know that we can't be more efficient and more effective without technology, so the second picture up there is the fact that we will continue to invest in efficient and effective IT that will allow us to do some of this work much quicker. Doesn't mean that those folks who prefer to work on paper would not be able to work with us. Actually, if you've walked into our offices recently to file an application, you realize that we scan those applications, we save the electronic and give you back your paper, so we're no longer saving paper. And if you wanted to do it online, you could do that online as well. So we'll continue with those rollouts. That's the only way that we're going to be able to keep up and be efficient, because we can't keep asking for more people. The government literally doesn't have the money to keep growing the number of folks in the department. So it's staff plus technology delivering the results that are there. The picture on the other slide there is our one of our senior labor and pension inspectors giving a presentation to young people on understanding their rights, and if they're young employers, their responsibilities under the labor law. Well attended, very well received, and we'll continue more of those. And Minister Miles gave us some marching orders as well to recognize that people are busy, change the times of the day that we do those, and ensure that all of those sessions are well advertised and are also available on social media streaming as well. So lots of work going on straight across the ministry, lots of things being amended, being looked at, and we're at question and answer now. So I'll hand back over to Mr. Moderator, and he will direct us through this part.
Look at you, ready to take a break. Not just yet.
I need to get a drink of water.
I know, you take a sip quick. For the benefit of the listening public and for those who are here, I just want to make a, I'll give you the opportunity just to make a few quick clarifications. You referenced the Immigration Act. I think you said the 2018 version was the most up-to-date version of it, but I know we're also discussing the Immigration Transition Act. Can you just possibly clarify the difference between the Immigration Act versus the Immigration Transition Act, and that just to say that this is amending the Transition Act, so the Immigration Act won't be called the Caymanian Protection Act, only the Transition Act?
So yes, there is the Immigration Transition Act. I think it's 2022 revision at this point. Is this on? Yep. The point that I was making, and I may have misspoke on that one, is that the last time we amended that law significantly was 2015. But this amendment, this Immigration Transition Amendment bill, is amending the Immigration Transition Act 2022 revision one of those things that it's doing is renaming the act to the Cayman Protection Act.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to take the opportunity to ask the members of the public who are here with us, if you do have questions, please make your way to the microphone. And remember, there is 2 questions per person. Of course, if there's time at the end, we will have more. As the minister said earlier, just to recognize the Minister for District Administration, the Honorable Nicholas DaCosta, who's here, as well as District Commissioner Mr. Tibbetts, who's here. Thank you so much for joining us. We also do have questions that will be coming in from social media, so I'll be taking some from social media and then some from in person as well. So anyone in the hall who would like to ask a question, please go right ahead and make your way to the microphone at the back of the hall. I'm going to start with some social media questions. We had an overflow of questions from yesterday, so some would be from today and some would be from yesterday as well that we didn't get to address. Firstly, under the new legislation, is there a fee attached to annual declarations?
The answer is it depends. So if you have permanent residency through the PR point system, you have a right to work fee that is equivalent to a work permit fee. That fee is due annually and is due at the time that you make your annual declaration as well. The other provisions that don't have an annual fee will not have an annual. So there's no annual fee to send in your marriage declaration, for example, that your marriage is still intact. There is introduction of annual fees for dependents going forward. So that would be a fee that would be payable at that point. But if you don't have a payment that is due as part of your right to work fee or a dependent fee, then no, it doesn't apply.
Earlier, you made reference to the word faculty quite a bit. Could you possibly clarify what you meant by faculty? I think sometimes when people hear faculty, they may think of a physical infrastructure of some sort, but that's not what the bill refers to when it says faculty. Or sorry, facility. Facility. I'm so sorry. That is all my fault.
I was like, I don't remember saying that. Was I on autopilot and I said something I don't remember? So facility is a general term we use to speak about a work permit or a certificate or something like that that is granted. So it's a general term. So it may be a PR certificate or a work permit license. We generally refer to all of those as facilities.
Thank you. Another question from social media. It says, I didn't write this, so if it doesn't sound right, bear with me. Re the 2-year off island, will it apply for those who just arrive on island with a 6-month temporary work permit and within that time frame secure permanent employment with another company?
Absolutely will apply. That is literally one of the things that we're hoping to discourage by doing this. So within your first 2 years in country, you would not be allowed to change employers unless you are able to demonstrate evidence-wise and proven by investigation that you're being abused or so on that would satisfy some of those criteria for which you could change employers. Otherwise, if you are changing employers, you need to go away for 12 months before you can do so.
The amendments that are being proposed has a specific carve-out to the Health Services Authority and the University College of the Cayman Islands. We spoke about that briefly yesterday. Could you possibly clarify what that means, and is that in any way similar to the CEMA?
Yeah. That means that people are actually reading the bill, which is good. So that question relates to a bit of a historical bit. So all the folks in the room remember HSA being a government department that became an authority, that became a government department that went back to an authority. Through that transition, HSA over the years has been submitting their contracts as if they were a core government department operating under the PSMA, but as a statutory authority, they operate under the labor law and should be going under work permit regime. This transitional provisions in there are giving them effectively 12 months to transition their staff off of contracts and on to work permits through that process. Yeah.
And do any of the proposed amendments in any way affect the recent ones that I was mentioning about CEMA that has its own amendment bill?
So SEMA is under the work permit regime. They have a cabinet-approved 53(1)B exemption for certain positions for a fixed period of time. The current provision was for 2 years, which ends at the end of this year, and Cabinet has agreed to extend that for an additional 2 years to 2027. The driving reason behind that is these are the individuals who are providing the technical expertise necessary for our FATF, CFATF work that we need to ensure that we no longer are grey-listed or blacklisted from a financial services
You
perspective.
said that was 2 years?
The exemption was for specific employee groups within SEMA for 2 years. So the original 2 years ends at the end of December, and Cabinet's already approved a new exemption that starts 1st of January but ends the 31st of December 2027.
I understand. Someone has a question as it relates to marriages of convenience. I know you said that there's difficulties with proving marriages of convenience, but the question relates to what actions will be taken against Caymanians that seek to engage in marriages of convenience. I think that has come up quite a bit as a means of deterrence.
Yeah, great question, and it gives me a little opportunity to say that we're also working on some additional strengthening of the immigration regulations as it relates to the duties of marriage officers and the whole regime around marriages and sort of the premarital vetting and so on. But marriages of convenience, if proven, both the Caymanian spouse and the non-Caymanian, or indeed if it's between two work permit holders or two PR holders, both sides would be prosecuted if we had enough evidence to do so. If there's false information being provided with the amendments in there, there could be action taken through that, but most usually it's in the form of refusing to grant a facility, which would be a RARC facility if we suspect that the marriage is one of convenience, or revoking that facility should we have that evidence to meet that threshold.
So just make sure I understand. So you said that the main deterrent is the revocation of it.
Yeah.
But will there be a financial penalty like how there are other sections?
Only if we get to the point that we have enough evidence that we can prove that.
Gotcha.
And which is challenging, we can prove if they lie on the application, so we can deal with that. But if the marriage itself and all that, we don't have the evidence bar to beyond a reasonable doubt that we can take that to court, no mens rea, then we would not be able to prosecute all the way through.
I understand. And just a reminder, anyone who has questions in the hall, please make your way to the microphone at the back. There's also some food that'll be served after. Can't have a Caymanian meeting without food. Star Island, so things going on. Next question. Give me a moment. Oh, yes. Can you speak more about the Caymanian by entitlement?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I've done so many of these presentations, sometimes I gloss over stuff that I should explain a bit more. So we use Cayman, entitled Caymanian in a certain way, colloquially, that we're referring to Caymanians by multiple generation, indigenous Caymanians. In law, when we make reference to Caymanian by entitlement, as Mr. Connor schooled me last Friday on where it actually came from, the original meaning in the legislation is this is an individual who is entitled to apply for a Cayman status grant. So they don't have Caymanian, they don't have any right to be Caymanian by generational, by descent, or any of those other things. They have satisfied either through the point system or some other way that, but specifically by entitlement, when it's used in the reference that I've been using it in, it's literally the children of individuals who at the time of that child's birth, those parents were not Caymanian when the child was born, but became Caymanian before the child turned 18. So if you were born as a child of Caymanian parents, you are Caymanian at birth, you are not Caymanian by entitlement. Yep.
Thank you. Just having a look around the room to see if there are any questions. No, I don't see any. Remember, if you are listening online, we do have staff who are moderating online to take your questions, and they'll be sent to me, and we'll ask to the panel. Mr. Chief Officer, you spoke earlier about categories of exemptions. For example, you mentioned the Parliament Management Commission and the Judiciary. I'm sure there are going to be, let's call them interested parties who may want to say, well, can my company become an exempted category? Could you possibly speak to that, about the intent of why there are certain exempted categories, and then also to the, I guess, the remit of the governor, because I think the current act gives her the right to exempt almost anyone.
Yeah, so I can say that Ms. Darlene Glidden, I hope she don't mind me calling her name, who is the legal draftsperson, the senior legislative drafter, I think is her official title, who was working with Ms. Rolla on the drafting side, literally dreamt about this section in her sleep one night. And we had a face-to-face meeting to sort of walk through it. So the technical bit for this is that the section 53, 1A, I think it is, now that exempts civil servants from term limits and from work permits, just says persons employed by the government. Yeah. When we were making the exceptions to include, to not exempt persons that fall under the PSMA, because the exemptions for PSMA are in the PSMA, they're not in the Immigration Transition Act as it relates to civil servants. We then were informed by another legal mind that by doing so, we missed a group of individuals who are not civil servants, and if you want to be super technical, constitutionally are not even public servants, but are persons appointed by the governor. And those persons are the judges, the magistrate, and in relation to the parliament, because they operate outside of all that, persons who are employed by the parliamentary management and ombudsman as well, falls into that group.
Minister, did you want to add anything? You're good. All right. Question from you.
So we had to provide a specific provision that captured those individuals so that you wouldn't have a magistrate, a non-Caymanian magistrate appointed by Her Excellency the Governor, and would need a work permit from a board in order to sit on the bench. That's why they're not included in there.
And going back to the question with HSA and UCCI, in that similar vein where you're giving that sort of 12-month period for people to come on, someone may ask, well, is that possibly going to be extended to other authorities? Do you foresee that, or is it likely going to remain closed as it is?
So the other authorities and government companies now prescribe to the work permit regime. For the most part, UCCI does subscribe to the work permit regime, but they have a couple of individuals with contracts that are still active on our database that we know that are there. So we've instituted those transitional provisions to allow them time to transition off that system. So, and HSA similarly will transition across.
Thank you. Question from YouTube. What was the reasoning for putting in place fees for job postings on the portal? Wouldn't that deter employers from posting genuine openings? The postings on WORC would be primarily for WPG and WPR. You're going to have to tell me what I'm not going to even pretend.
So that's somebody that's working in the industry. WPG is a work permit grant. WPR is a renewal.
Gotcha.
So the current law actually has a provision where there's a fee attached to the advertising on the jobs portal. It was not implemented, but it's actually in the law. So we're actually operating outside of the law right now by not charging the fee. So it's not new. It's actually already in there. We're just giving notice that we'll start charging for that. And we're also signaling as well that in order to expand the view of the transparency of jobs that are available in country, in addition to the legal requirement to advertise. So regardless of the fee, an employer has to apply on and advertise the job on the portal if they intend to apply for a work permit, either a grant or renewal. It's a legal requirement to do so unless they are exempted under some very special circumstances. So in addition to that legal requirement to put it on the portal, there'll also be a legal requirement to advertise in the newspaper for, I think it's 21 days. So before the job portal, employers were required to advertise in the newspaper. We put the bits on the portal in place of the newspaper. In hindsight now, we still know that people are missing those opportunities, so we're asking it to be both. Actually, we're not asking, we're mandating by law that it be both.
At the fear of misinforming the public, I just want to get Minister Miles to clarify. He mentioned something in your speech earlier as it relates to getting young Caymanians employed. You said your seminars are going to happen every prescribed period to give Caymanians the opportunity who are employed. Can you reiterate what that period is, how Caymanians can get involved, and most importantly, for our public here, when is it coming to the BRAC?
So I would say over the last 6 months, what we have looked at is how do we look at human capital in the country? We've really never had an established human capital department. We have a small unit. I'm sure most of you may remember the National Workforce Development Agency. At one point, it was under education. When I worked in the Ministry of Education between 2010 and 2017, NWDA was under us. When work transitioned from immigration to work, that department was transitioned under work. What we are doing is looking at how do we carve out a strategic human capital plan. We've had major reports from the Auditor General to UCCI. Our own work department have participated in establishing major human capital reports. However, no one takes the ownership of any of the recommendations. What we are doing different is that we now have to have a human capital plan, and our department, which is that small unit in that department, we have to carry that out. Now, that's no easy feat for 5 people, so a lot of what we want to do as well is outsource. So we're joining with private sector. The team and I from work have established a lot of contacts now with the HR Society and across industry hiring managers. We've also making connections with, there's an organization that's called the Cayman Islands Recruitment Agency, or Association, sorry. It's an NPO that all recruitment entities are registered with. Now, what does that mean? All of these are professional recruitment organizations that our young people never really have an opportunity to help them find employment. We need to tap into that. So in addition to jobs, the Jobs Cayman portal, we need to give our young people every opportunity, and not just young people, people in general that are transitioning between jobs. Maybe you're underemployed and you're looking for something better. Maybe you just need to be skilled up, but you need, an extra professional hand in ensuring that you get the job that ultimately can help you pay your bills and thrive in the country. So that human capital plan is going to look differently, but it's going to come with actual deliverables. Ensuring that on a quarterly basis, I mean, we've already started. So we started from September. As I said, we've had at least 2 initiatives just this week that is proven fruitful. We had an initiative on September 4th. We had one on the 5th. We had one on the 8th and the 9th that we had over 300 people be interviewed. We've engaged over 30 plus employers, and we have absolutely gotten a lot of people in the door for employers. Come January, that's going to be quarterly. So we're going to have as many because we now have the professional entities on board to help us move young people directly into employment.
Thank you. We do have more questions on social media, but I do see we have a question in the hall, sir. If you just give him a moment, he's going to turn on the microphone for you. You're good to go.
My name is George Walton.
If you can just speak into the microphone a little bit for me.
My name is George Walton, and I've been sitting here, and I've been impressed with the amount of technical knowledge that has been shared with us. But the questions remain in my mind. As Caymanians, how did we become so voracious in eating our youngs? I'm going to say that again. How, as Caymanians, we traditionally became so voracious in eating our youngs. I mean by that, how come or we spend money sending our children to school overseas and all over the place, even technical college, and they come home and can't get a job? I mean, this is the question I ask myself, and I can't get by it. How is it we prefer others other than ourselves? Where did we develop that mentality? And how are we going to prevent ourselves from getting in that same bind in the future? And I'm not against foreigners of any kind. I want to make that quite clear. But we have been habitually eaters of our young. Thank you.
I think the minister is in double Dutch mode for that question. Minister Miles.
You're right, sir. And I applaud you for asking that question, because for 35 years I've asked myself the same question. As a staunch advocate for young people and certainly for families, one of the challenges that I've always seen is politics. Politics happens. Our budget, our national budget is about $1.5 billion. That takes a lot. Therefore, people will be overlooked. Vulnerable people. People that I love and care about are often overlooked, and the majority of them are our children. We have sensationalized work permits. We've sold it out to the highest bidders because we need to keep that $1.5 billion pumping through the veins of government. And we'll sell our mothers for that. Most politicians would. I am just not willing to do that. So, when we were elected, I sat with my colleague who has also went through a lot of hardship. He explained to me his hardship coming home from college with 2 degrees, couldn't get a job. That resonated with me, but it has resonated with 9 other people that sit next to us. We're not here to build legacies anymore. I don't have to put up a building to prove to you that I have done something in government. We need to protect people. So to answer your question, we have to now stop and say, who are we doing this for? When I wake up every morning, I wake up in the morning to serve you. When Nick wakes up every morning, he wakes up every morning to serve you. All of us do. None of us need a job. We're here because a job needs to be done. And our responsibility right now is stop eating our young. Stop selling out our people. Stop selling out our culture. Our legacy is our people. Not the buildings that we build. Not the land that we have. Yes, that's part of it. But the people are the most important things that we now have to focus on. And if we don't do that, then I can tell you, I don't want this job. Because if I'm not going to serve you, I don't need the money. Nick doesn't need the money. Our responsibility is to make sure that we leave this place better than when we came in. We generate money. We don't have to go out looking for it anymore. We're established. Yes, we need to protect it. Yes, we need to compete. But the most important part of what our coalition is geared to do is fight for people, not fight for property or build roads. It's a small part of our job now. Biggest part of our job is to make sure that those borders are protected. And that's what Nicholas is doing. That's what I am doing. That's what Wes is doing. That's what our entire team is geared for. But to also make sure that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren has a stake in the ground in this country. Because without that, this is not worth it for us. And that's what we talk about every day.
We have a few final questions on social media, and I certainly want to get any final questions in the hall. I see a lady making her way to the back. I will forego the questions on social media for now and go straight to you.
I want to applaud you for your for the work fairs, for your
If you can just speak into the mic.
for focusing on the young people, but especially in the hospitality sector. So when they get these jobs, are they paying them a living wage? Can they afford to live here? Especially in the BRAC, when the kids grow up, they don't want to come back to the BRAC. There are no jobs here. They can't afford to live here. They can afford to go overseas and live a nice life. So what are we doing to make it affordable for them?
When I walked in 6 months ago, there was a huge document on my desk that read minimum wage report. Great question, by the way. Thank you. I looked at Wes and the team and I said, what is this document? What's the minimum wage? It was from 2023. I said, well, okay, why haven't we put this in? Well, the last government didn't have the appetite to do it. I took it to caucus, we passed it. It's going to be done January 1st. Minimum wage is a starting point. What we have to continue to do is leverage every employer and send a message that no work permits will be granted unless our people are hired and promoted and trained. We've never done that. We've made employers come in and dictate the pace on what we should do and what we shouldn't do because they've dangled work permit money. We're no longer doing that. Our responsibility is how do we get our people up into the upper echelon of any organization? So I've made it very clear to the hotels, I don't want to talk jobs anymore. I know some people simply just want a little job and that's okay. But every hotel that I've gone into, certainly in Grand, every general manager is non-Caymanian. What we've done, we have put a glass ceiling on all of those jobs. Directors, supervisors, managers are all from another country. Well, why? We don't have the talent? Yes, we do. We have the interest. People told me that Caymanians didn't want to work those jobs, and yet I had one career orientation. 300 young people or 300 people showed up. We have to also start to incentivize organizations to come to the BRAC, to move their companies to the BRAC, and that's what we're working with Nicholas on. We've approached at least several major accounting firms because we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to get on the ground floor of this. Everything of what we are doing, ladies and gentlemen, is to work on your behalf. It will never be done overnight. There's been a lot of cleanup. In the last 6 months, I can tell you, just the budget alone was a cleanup exercise. Now, Nicholas has been doing this certainly a lot longer, so he knew a lot of information that he's been teaching all of us about because he at least had a bird's eye view of what the last government was doing. But there's been a lot of cleanup. It's taken us 6 months just to understand that we can't go ahead and budget the same way. Our SPS has always been, a disaster. We've been able to understand how that looks. But the goal for us now is to start incentivizing organizations to bring their organizations here. We have a lot of law firms, financial services organizations. They have brokers working in those organizations. We've already started to open up dialogue. How do we get them back here? How do we make sure that it's affordable? And therefore, I need to make immigration efficient. Because if immigration isn't efficient, they're not going to do this. If we can't, ensure that the costs come down and people are being provided with more benefits, no one's going to come back, not just to CAYMAN BRAC, but to Grand, because it's too expensive to live here. So I only want to share with you, we're doing everything we possibly can. There is a plan. As we roll out the budget over the next 2 weeks, please tune in to Parliament. It's your Parliament. Please tune into it. We've put a lot of focus. We put hard 6 months, and you could, ask Nick, at times we work until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because we need to get it done because it's too important to fail now. You've heard about government
not caring, that's not what we have. You have people that are willing to do this. We're in it from 8 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. Him and I are working together because we share the same synergies of you, the Caymanian people. We're going to make this work, and I'm telling you, I'm excited to have this over the next 4 years, to have someone like Nicholas by my side who's very knowledgeable, very well educated, works hard, knows the system, knows how to get stuff done, along with another 9 other people. The premier's really awesome. He wants to actually make sure that everybody is firing on all cylinders. What we have to ensure we do is keep you in the forefront. And as long as God is my witness, as long as we are in this, our people are going to be in the forefront of everything that we do. Every possible angle that we do, you are in the forefront of that. So to answer your question, we're going to get this right for you.
I'm conscious of the time, and we are wrapping up, but we do have 2 final questions, which I'd like to oblige and get out there. The first one reads, both Minister and Chief Officer Howell spoke about improved compliance. How are we addressing those who do not abide by good business practices and not meeting requirements for pension and health contributions? That was a question from yesterday that also came up. And I'll take the opportunity to throw in the second question as well, and you guys can use it to wrap up. Question says, I noticed some of the sections of the Act are not in the bill. Does that mean these sections are being removed? With those 2 questions, over to you guys.
So I'll deal with the last one first. The bill, as I shared when we started, so I know some people tune in at different times and so on, the bill modifies the existing law. So if the bill doesn't mention a section, that means that that part in the existing law remains the same. If it's being removed, the bill will say this is being repealed. If it's being replaced with something else, repeal this section and replace it with this section. Otherwise, we're either adding new bits or amending existing bits. So if something isn't mentioned in the bill, it means that it remains the same in the law. The first question was in relation to...
Yes, health, pension, and contributions.
Yes.
Compliance and good business practices.
Okay, so the simplest way that I can say this is when we have offenses detailed in our laws that have willful or intent or intended to, it raises the evidence level that we need to meet in order to prosecute someone. So what that means is if we can't prove that an employer intentionally meant to not pay, intentionally deceived, intentionally did so, the word intent really raises the bar. What we've done in a number of cases in the new immigration amendment bill is change that language to if this happened, not if you intended for it to happen. In law, that's a strict liability. It means it happened and you're responsible for it. So you can then argue your case before the courts, or if you're being administratively fined, you can argue against that. But we no longer have to do all the extra work that it takes to prove intent. We can simply document you had a duty to pay, you did not pay, you are breaching the law, you have a responsibility to answer for that. So that change, when it comes in for those pieces of legislation, will transform the issues we see before our courts just within the last couple of months. Cases in Jevi, you were telling me last night, Mr. Moderator, that some of these cases are 8, 10 years old in relation to how long it's taken for the documents to be produced to come before the courts and for that whole process to be brought to justice. So totally not acceptable, and we're fixing that.
Thank you, Minister. Chief Officer, I don't know if you have any final words before we wrap up.
Just like to say that we appreciate the turnout tonight. It's a work night, school night. We'll appreciate your time. For those listening who still have some questions and who want a face-to-face, we will be in Northside on Monday night at 7 at the Northside Civic Center. That will be, I believe, our last town hall grouping. Minister will go in, the ministers will go into Parliament on Wednesday. and SBS budget, and hopefully by the end of all that, we'll have the immigration bill there as well. So lots of work happening. I encourage you to send in any information, any questions that you may have, any requests for additional information to our websites. And I just want to thank all the folks working in the background to make these happen. Miss Monica Smith, better known as Liz Smith in the back there, has been working all sorts of magic. Her Rolodex digital phone book is bigger than mine. She knows who to call for what and when to get things to happen. So Miss Liz, thank you for your care for all of us. Miss Rolna, whose work has gone, she's toiled over this thing. This is her baby. This is her bill, so great amount of work there. Legal drafting as well. Miss Darlene Glidden, brilliant legal mind, and has worked tirelessly to make the bill happen. So lots of people working in the background. And just like to thank Minister for being a great leader. And before we close out, just to say, huge proud moment for me today to see our government team being the first flight on the ground in Jamaica, bringing relief supplies and so on. So thank you all for that. And those of us who went through Paloma over here and Ivan over there know what it is to have mosquitoes and darkness and generators when you get them and so on. So our thoughts and prayers go out to our brothers and sisters on the other side of the sea here.
Minister, any final comments?
Just to echo what the Chief Officer said, it's been an absolute privilege to work with Wes, Rolna, Sean, Jeremy, the team. I am about getting stuff done. I don't have a lot of time, folks, to sit in rooms and have people talk about stuff. When I sit with folks like Nick, who wants to get stuff done, I'm in good company. When I sit with the Premier or the Deputy Premier or the Minister of Education, we are all about outcomes. I'm not here to knock on any other government. A lot of things have been said, and then not done. That's not what you're going to get with us. Our responsibility now is to follow through, and to follow through with real, tangible things that Caymanians want and need. That's why we've gone through the levels of consultation with this bill. You guys know what have happened over the last couple of years with the other white paper that came through. It wasn't consulted with you. We're doing this different. We're bringing labor reform because it needs to happen. Labor reform haven't been done in another 13, 14 years. Pension reform. We have done everything we possibly can to make sure that we protect our people, that we are in this for the long haul to make sure that you have a better life. I'm tired of seeing Caymanians struggle when someone gets off a plane and making millions of dollars. I am tired of seeing that. I am tired of hearing moms, dads, grandmoms complain that their young people aren't given the opportunity. And as a government, we've continued to capitulate on things because we've always thinking about what the person that gets off the plane or the boat is going to give us. I am concerned with you, where you're going, your hopes and dreams, how you want to get there. How do I help you pave a path to get there? Ladies and gentlemen, we're not always going to get it right. But I'm going to tell you, we're always going to be the first in line to say, you know something, we're not getting this right. That's why I'm sitting here in front of you saying, we're not getting it right with immigration. We need to get it right now. It is not going to be perfect, but I can tell you, if it's broken, we're going to fix it. And because of that, you have my unwavering commitment, the minister's unwavering commitment, and our government's unwavering commitment that we're going to work on your behalf. What you get, what you see up here is what you get. I don't have time to lie to you or deceive you. I don't have the time to speak in political terms because that's just not what I do. My responsibility is to serve you to the best of my ability and to always be truthful. And sometimes I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, and I'm going to tell you what is authentic to me. I grew up with a single mom on Mirror Street, Eastern Avenue, Markfield Lane. That's where I'm from. My responsibility is that I will never forget my roots. I am Caymanian to the bone. That's never going to change. Money's not going to change that. I promised my mother one thing At least 6 years ago when I started to get involved in politics. I will never change, and I will never allow politics to change me. I will always stay true to who I am, and who I am is an engine that's going to work incredibly hard, and I'm going to be as honest and authentic as I can to make sure that Caymanian people are taken care of. I am not everybody's sugar. Trust me when I tell you. Sometimes you either love me or you just can't stand me. But I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm always going to do the courageous thing. I'm always also going to go against the grain, because sometimes going with the flow is always not the right thing to do. Anytime you ask me something, I'm always going to give you what I feel in my chest, what my heart tells me. And that's what I know. That's what I've taught. Like I said, I grew up in humble beginnings, and I'm never going to forget that. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. It is an absolute honor to serve you. I will never forget about what we will accomplish over the next 4 years. What I'm asking for you to do, hold us accountable for that. Please be safe going home. God bless you. Please keep Jamaica in your thoughts, and all of those families over there. Have a brilliant night. Thank you again for coming out.
Thank you so much to the minister. And just as a reminder, there are some food at the back that you guys can enjoy. There's also copies of the law at the back should you want to collect a copy. They're right there at the back, so see Miss Liz. And also just a reminder that the minister will be on Radio Cayman tomorrow. So feel free to tune in tomorrow to hear more of the conversation. A huge thank you to the minister's staff who made this event possible today. I see Miss Martha at the back, as well as the acting director of work, who's up here as well. All praises and commendations, please send them through to the minister's staff. All questions and concerns and complaints, see Minister DaCosta. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you at the next one. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
And it concludes Radio Cayman's delayed broadcast of the meeting taking place in Cayman Brac. It was the Cayman Brac Town Hall concerning the Immigration Transition Amendment and Validation Bill 2025. It came to you from the Layman E. Scott Senior High School in Cayman Brac. And a thank you to AV Solutions Cayman for providing us with the video feed of tonight's meeting.
If they are talking about us,
living in your head rent-free all this time.
we must be relevant.